It's time for my virtual Jericho with John Mayer.
Hello, it was very special, my Jericho, all about the Boatyard question. Now, why am I doing this? We want to generate proper debate on the biggest issues been facing the community for the last 2 decades. What to do about the land canal side where the Boatyard was. It's possibly the biggest underdeveloped open space left in central Oxford. What happens there determines the future of our community. Is it residential? Is it back to the 19th century industry? Or is it mixed? Lack of public debate on this matter has been stunning. No public meetings in my 7 years here, only 4 My Jericho events and discussions they put on by me. That is not exactly satisfactory. Today is a new dawn for that debate. Hence this programme. I'll step out of my chair's role in a minute first to put my point of view. The others later will put different points of view. That's called open debate. Now I'm a utopian, but a very practical one. I have a vision of Jericho Canalside, which is a vibrant, thriving area right through from Worcester College to the boardwalk to Mount Place. Greenery, water, boats and more. And at the centre of that, the true crown in that jewel is St Barnabas the church. First, it's time for a short history lesson. Jericho grew up around the canal and the industry that came with it. Much of this derived from the excellent new book, Jericho Oxford, curated by Paul Southouse, Mark Davies, Chris Andrews and yours truly. It's available from all good bookshops in Oxford and 6 Nelson Street. And whilst we're on a commercial break, you can also buy this wonderful hand-drawn tea towel of Jericho for just £5. The lovely paintings in the book are mainly from Valerie Petts and the photos from Chris Andrews. We'll be using them a lot in this programme. We'll give you a sample tonight, but if you want to know more, buy the book. In the past, Jericho had 4 big factories. Number 1, the Eagle Works, Lucy's, which moulded iron on both sides of the canal from 1825. It became a very busy, noisy foundry and at peak employed hundreds of people. Lucy was Jericho in so many ways. Ever wondered why Juxon Street houses are owned by the company? They bought them up to stop people complaining about the lorry deliveries. The Eagle Works closed in 1997 and became the rather pleasant mixed housing development that's there now. That, I'm sure, took a battle to convert from one to the other. Boating berths were lost, but housing was gained. Second, the tallow factory by Mount Bridge over the canal. The factory operated from the late 1860s until just before the First World War. It existed at the end of Canal Street, and all agreed it smelt to high heaven. Jericho's residents petitioned for many years to have the abominable nuisance closed down. They won in the end. The Jericho Boatyard on land then owned by British Waterways. The coal and other working boats would go there to be repaired back in the last century and before. And the Oxford University Press, which printed millions of books here from 1830. The printery, you can still see it in Wellington Street, was huge. On-site printing stopped there in 1989. The rest of Jericho was light industry, small workshops and so on. Today, all 4 big factories are closed, converted to much needed housing. A mixture of posh and social in the Eagle Works, lots of them. Greenery abounds in Mount Place, thanks to the excellent green in Jericho, and offices in plenty in OUP. Jericho is firmly post-industrial. Only the old Boatyard site remains of industrial Jericho. Today, that is very, very sad. Overgrown with derelict buildings and used as a storage space by builders. I know, I've been inside. It's surrounded by hoardings on all sides, so nothing can be seen in St Barnabas from the canal. It is quite simply a blot on the landscape. The Boatyard, nothing in the Boatyard has been repaired for up to 3 decades. It was squatted on, and then the people were forcibly evicted in 2006. Since then, it's been a battle over the future between the community, in inverted commas, and a series of developers. The site is now on its 4th attempt to develop. That's the subject of an appeal on January 17th. The Jericho Wharf Trust claims to speak on behalf of the community, but to quote Bob Dylan, watch the parking meters and don't follow leaders. They inherited a pile of mud, and after nearly 2 decades, there is still just a pile of mud. Their assets are minimal. They will need at least £20 million to properly develop the site, and it's not clear where they're going to get that from. Do they have that money? How will they raise it if the developer walks away, as I think he may well this time? What I find intriguing about many on the Wharf Trust Committee is not that they don't live within grinding distance of the new Boatyard. Some indeed not in Jericho itself. Did I hear the word NIMBYs? Should we cite the yard at the bottom of Hayfield Road in North Oxford or elsewhere in North Oxford? Lest we forget, The centrepiece of any development should not be any boatyard, but the magnificence of the east side of St Barnabas Church, built in 1869. That is the beating architectural heart of our community and needs to be revealed again. Revealing that should be at the core and raison d'etre of any plans for the site. Like a local Legoland, let's unpick the various bits of the current utopia that the plan are wished for. First of all, the bridge across the canal. That ought to be opening up in Jericho to the route to the station and beyond. And it is a big if, but in the words of Monty Python, that parrot is very firmly dead. It was kiboshed by the Canal and River Trust last year. They said simply unsafe. Any Chinese whispers to the contrary are being economical with the actuality, to quote Alan Clark. We are where we are with that no bridge. What about the piazza? Much noise has been made of that. The Jericho Wharf Trust would have it as a centre for maypole dancing, markets and much more. There are two elemental problems. It's up a cul-de-sac and, with no bridge, and the Jericho Entertainment Centre has since shifted to Mount Place anyway, thanks to Green in Jericho and the monthly Lazy Sundays which I invented. They've happened 9 times since. That's moved the dial. Once a month in the summer, it buzzes with music and more. Hundreds come. Next one, April 16th. Put it in your diary. So any people's piazza by the church will be quite simply redundant. Let's have a look at what's planned for the new boatyard. It's a mini factory. No ifs or buts, but a noisy boat repair factory. A commercially run repair factory run by 2 leads of Banbury. A 3-berth boatyard. Yes, you heard that right. 3 berths with overnight accommodation, grinding and much more. Not peaceful. The developers say the cost of them is 2.4 million. The community has to find 756,000 to fit that out. Residents say they used to hear the noise so as far away as a railway station in the good old days when the boatyard was working. Recently, somebody was repairing their boat in Mount Place. That sound can be heard hundreds of yards away. Traffic will be coming in from the canal and also through Jericho. Industry returns to our residential community. Good or bad? Well, you decide. The lack of a working boatyard has made minimal difference to the local boaters. There are just 16. Yes, you heard that right. 16 of them moored on our stretch of the Oxford Canal. None, as far as I know, has sunk since the yard was closed. There are working boatyards for repair within cruising distance of Enslow, Low Hayford and Tooley's in Banbury. Jericho is the end of the canal. It's now a leisure, not a working area. And lest we forget, Jericho has a very thriving other boat business. Canal Cruises right next door to the site with its 10 for hire boats, cutely named after Oxford colleges. That has a small repair yard of its own. For reasons best known to themselves, the local boaters refuse to use that. Frankly, I am not convinced of the case for a new boatyard. No real demand and environmentally very damaging to Jericho. Removing that from development would free up at least £3 million and it would free up copious imagination. Maybe that site can be used for social housing, the lack of which is a big lacunae in the current plans. Let's look at the plans for a new community centre, shall we? Above and beside the boatyard. The cost to develop is 1.9 million. The community will have to find another 1.4 million. Planned, and sit back and take this all in, are a sports hall, a dance hall, 5 meeting rooms, a large preschool room, plenty of offices rooms for rental, 2 council rooms, a cafe with kitchen and more. When phase 1 and phase 2 are built, there will be 4,500 square feet of it. It's way over ambitious. The current community centre in Canal Street, owned by the church by the way, has lapped into nothing more than a lettings agency for some rather outre practitioners, tattoo artists, life drawers, various forms of therapy, and it's used by very few locals. What were you last there? This community centre is mainly, unused by the community. They struggle to drum up business for a small 3-hour Saturday cafe. The community association itself, in my not so humble opinion, is semi-moribund. Looks in rather than out. It's time for a rethink, a rebrand, and much more for the JCA. I think they will find it difficult to run a new community centre there professionally. And 2 ideas for free for the new centre. Create a small interactive Jericho museum, featuring the role of the boaters' boatyard to replace the lost yard, and a private police council drop-in centre to make neighbourhood watch and democracy much easier. So whatever the outcome of the planning appeal next week, it's time to go back to basics on this site. The Jericho Wharf Trust is a bit like the Japanese prisoners of war, who never accepted peace. Come out of the bunkers, folks. The war is over. Think holistically. But think of the whole canal side. Like all jewels and any crowns, it has to be worked out and carefully crafted. Otherwise, instead of the mud on the site, Jericho will have two big white elephants, carbuncles in the word of King Charles, just like the unused Bull's Court on Mount Place, or will have nothing. Jericho needs to look forward rather than backwards. This is the 21st century, not the land of coal, iron, steel, and working boats. Time for a real debate to begin. The future is bright if we make it. Let discussion begin.
John asked me to give an opinion on the proposed new boatyard development for Jericho. As he knows, I have an opinion on the matter, but basically, I know Port Meadow and the Oxford Canal quite well. I've been walking there on and off for about 30 years. I remember it when it was in the days of Lucy's as a working factory and even the functioning boatyard. Of course, much has changed since then. It's the canal itself has changed. The amount of housing along its edges has changed. And in fact, this is part of the problem, I think, is the amount of ribbon development along the canal. The start of the canal now is something of a visual desert. There is zero interest for anyone walking along the canal these days. You see brick walls or people's back gardens. There's nothing much except the boats themselves, which is rather sad, really. Because I mean, boats I think are endlessly interesting, and anything to do with the water I find interesting, and human activity on the water I find fascinating. So, of course, I tend to be in favour. I would like to see a boatyard come back to Jericho because, for me, it would input some much needed human activity to the area. You know, I mean. You can only admire a few ducks, feed the ducks, moorhens every so often, and watch a few canal boats go by. But human activity by watching boats being built, repaired, modified, whatever, is, I think, something that's far more interesting. It's human activity, it's life. It could actually, well, it will bring some limited employment to the area, which I think is much needed in Jericho. But it also has the possibility of creating a social centre of some kind, a cafe. You see what's happened in Thrupp. The boatyard at Thrupp now and the cafe and the locks there are very much a place where people go and visit just to sit and watch what's going on.
So that was Philip Hunt, who is a long-term resident of Oxford, a long-term walker along the footpath. So we're going to have a series of different voices. Now, Professor Gary Browning, who is a professor of politics, political thought at Oxford Brookes University and a Jericho resident. I asked him first what he thought.
Well, I mean, what I would say is that I've been living in Jericho for a little while, and it strikes me that the area, the boatyard area, does need developing. It's at the minute an eyesore, and it's dragged on for 30 years. There seems to be a need for some kind of a boatyard, and there seems to be there could be the prospect of having a kind of rejuvenated scene there by the church, and it could be really good. But we've suffered, I think, because for over 30 years, developers have been involved who want to make money and put that first. And defenders of the local community want to put a stop to developments which might infringe in some historic way kind of the aspects of Jericho. And so what we've got is stalemate, and we've had that for a long time. And I think that's really quite disappointing. We're about to go to kind of some kind of appeal in later this month and see if the developers Cornerstone can have their kind of appeal against kind of limiting their development or stopping their development. And the bugbear there for me is affordable housing. They seem to have withdrawn any commitment to affordable housing, and I think that's bad. But what I would want to see is some kind of constructive dialogue between players in this kind of venture so that we get something done.
How do you achieve that? How do you achieve some sort of dialogue, some form of consensus?
Well, I'm sorry if I haven't got answers, but I mean, what I would emphasise is there needs to be some kind of dialogue. I mean, what I would hope is that I think the council rightly did point to the lack of affordable housing as being the big problem with the Cornerstone development. And one way forward, I guess, would be for Cornerstone to say, yeah, we might not give you the 50% of kind of affordable housing, which you think is desirable in the city. We might not give 40%, but we'll give a significant percentage of affordable housing. If they show some willingness to do that, then maybe the council, maybe defenders of historic community like the Jericho Association will kind of come round and engage in that constructive dialogue to get something done. But that's one way forward.
Back to the boatyard. Is there any demand for the boatyard? There are just 16 boats moored in Jericho, 16 boats moored in Jericho. None of them are sunk. So why do we need a
Yeah.
big factory built there?
I'm not a technical expert on what we need of the boatyard. Historically, of course, there's been a boatyard there for years, and I certainly had a friend, Esther Pozzani, whose boat was rechristened, Lyra's Defiance by Philip Pullman. You know, and there is a kind of romance about the boatyard. I mean, as I understand it, there is a kind of facility that it would be helpful to have at least one boatyard there to help with the local boats. But certainly at the minute they're proposing to build more than that. And that seems, I'm not technically versed on this, but I'm not sure if we need that. But I suspect we do need some kind of boatyard.
If they came to you and said, we'd like to build a small factory in a residential area like Jericho, what would you say?
I'd say no. But look, I mean, I'm not defending kind of developments in Jericho in the sense that I've got suspicions about this observatory development where we're going to have a concert hall. And I certainly didn't ask for a concert hall. And if we want a balanced community, I'm not sure everyone likes classical music. Also, I find the halls of residence, which kind of oversee Port Meadow, pretty awful, and I wonder how these got through planning associations. I think a local factory could be a problem. It might be a bit of an eyesore, and it might be a problem. But if it employed people locally, if it was reasonably kind of svelte in its appearance, I'd be open to having a look at it. I'd be a bit sceptical, but there we are.
But we live in a post-industrial area. I mean, you live in the Lucy Flats, which was a huge ironworks, and now it's some lovely flats. You know, the tallow factory in Mount Place has gone. Oxford University Press no longer prints books there. So why should we resurrect something from the 19th and 20th century?
Yeah, fair enough. And things do change and things do move on. And the flats where I live, I think are okay, actually. They have got a mix of kind of residents and styles of flat, and that's good. And they look okay. And the restaurants that have been set up in Walton Street, most people would say are good, you know, but I was a friend of a waitress there who, when Brasserie Blanc was opened, they had eggs thrown at the kind of at the window because people were upset by it. So yes, things do move on. So they can move on, but it is an opportunity. This development. I mean, to have or maintain some kind of balance in housing provision, but also maybe to have kind of a community as kind of centre and a piazza that looks good, you know. But you can't have everything. Where would you put it? So I think we can move along, and I want to see openness on all sides. You know, I mean, the developer is interested in making money, so what's new about that? But I think they've got to be prepared to put in some kind of balanced housing, and the local community people have to be prepared to accept some change.
Now, my last question: what about being imaginative and actually creating an entire Jericho Canal side that goes from Worcester College all the way to Mount Place and beyond with a boardwalk? Why don't we think of that?
Yeah, well, I think imagination is useful. And so thanks for kind of putting that forward. And I'd have to have a look at it and see where we are. But what I do note is that we've had 30 years of kind of stalling on just developing the kind of the boatyard area. And I think that's pretty appalling. Let's get that moving, if we can.
People have to get out of bunkers, surely, for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and get round the table. You could have some kind of discussion where, people kind of get together. But as I understand it, it needs a developer to put some money into the project. That the local people and council haven't got the money to kind of front up for a major development.
It's 20 million quid's worth. Where's that sort of money going to come from?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. But I guess it may be either we work with the developer we've got and push them hard to moderate their scheme so that it is a bit more socially kind of acceptable, or we kind of try to kind of enlist developers of a more friendly persuasion and a more beforehand, rather than sitting in the bunker and moaning. Either way.
My really very, very last question. Are you hopeful that anything will be built in your lifetime?
Well, I'm certainly not hopeful that a change will happen in soon. I'm not hopeful about that. But on the other hand, politics is about getting things done. It's about fairness, it's about justice, but it's also about getting things done. So all of us have to kind of bear that in mind.
There we are. The debate is already starting. You can comment on YouTube chat. They're flowing in. Moscow says the whole thing is a mess. He's been here for 8 years. There are other boatyards within sailing distance. The man who runs the Lower Hayford boatyard says he's full, and he's sure the people in Oxford want a new boatyard. And also, there's some question: are there any 16 boats? Well, I'm told firmly there are only 16 boats moored in Jericho, so that's a number. So keep the comments coming. This is all about having a debate. It's not about one person's point of view or one set of point of view. So I mean, do we need 3 docks, for example, say about the boatyard?
Yes, we do. The boatyard, to my mind, I mean, I'm not a boater. I'm a resident of Jericho, but the boatyard provides an essential facility for boaters, not just Oxford boaters, but people who use the Oxford Canal. It also provides affordable accommodation. If people can be on the canal and come and use the boatyard when they need it, it provides extra accommodation. Accommodation in Jericho is very expensive, and Jericho is becoming gentrified as a result. And also, it seems to me that the boatyard is it's part of the industrial heritage of Jericho, and the waterways and Jericho Wharf. They're important for this Jericho and for the city. Otherwise, we just become another suburb, like all the boring gated suburbs that are sprouting up all over Oxford.
Let me ask you a question. How many residential boats are there in Jericho?
I've no idea. And there are certainly fewer than there used to be because people can't get their boats seen to.
I'll give you the answer. The answer is 16. And as far as I can see, none of them have sunk in the last 17 years.
Well, I mean, but people would come in from outside. I don't know where people have to go now to go and get their boats fixed and get stuff. I just feel I'm not a boater, but I'm in favor of a boatyard because it's part of the tradition of Jericho. And I don't want more fancy 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses that are selling for $1.5 million or 2 million. I want a mixture of people.
So would you be in favour of a factory coming back to Jericho? Because that's what the boatyard is, a small factory.
No, it's not a factory. It's a community facility. And the new boatyard, from what I understand, will be enclosed and soundproofed, and the works will be restricted and managed, from what I gather. And so the public will be able to view the works from the community cafe and learn more about boating traditions. And that's also important because boating provides, there is music that's connected, there's poetry that's connected to the boats, there's a lot of culture that goes around the boats. It's not just, people living on them.
Do we need a 3-berth boatyard? That's 3 berths commercially run in the middle of a residential area. What's the point?
I'm not a boater, so I'm not the right person to reply to that. I imagine that, like anything these days, there has to be enough facilities to make it commercially worth existing. I expect that's the reason, but I don't know, and I wouldn't want to be quoted on that. That's just a feeling I have, because as I say, I'm not a boater.
Now, what about if we got rid of the boatyard and use that money for social housing?
Well, that won't happen because we know that since David Cameron, developers are not interested in social housing. They put up expensive housing and they just tip their hats by providing one house. That's what's happening with the proposal of the development, that's existing at the moment.
Would you be in favour of bringing the tallow factory back to Mount Place?
No, of course not.
Or indeed Eagle Works back to Lucy's. Why do we do that?
I mean, Lucy's are. I mean, we're talking different times anyway. Mount Place, as you know, thanks to the greening Jericho and your efforts, has become a place where people meet, where people sit, where they read their paper. There's no more drugs. People play pool. It's become a social center. And even in the winter, we meet there every Thursday afternoon. And those of us who are involved with greening Jericho, as a result, go and meet and in each other's houses. New people join. So Mount Place is providing a social facility. The flats that Lucy put up, 180 of them, at the time people had mixed feelings about it, but they are there, and that we're not going to change that.
What about let's be imaginative and develop a whole Jericho Canal side that goes all the way from Worcester to Mount Place. So there's a boardwalk that goes along there. Why not do that?
It's not going to happen, John. You know as well as I do that the developers and the city will see to it that they put in the maximum number of houses. They'll go right up to the edge of the canal so people can't get at them. And it'll just be another gated community. And as for getting into Worcester, it's difficult enough as it is at the moment. You have to go in and show a proof of where you live with a photograph and a utilities bill or a driver's license. I mean, in your dreams.
Let's talk about the community centre that's planned there. That's way ambitious, isn't it? You've got a sports hall, a dance hall, an early learning place, lots of the JCA couldn't possibly run that in a month of Sundays, could they?
Well, although I'm a trustee, because their meetings take place on an evening when I have a rehearsal for a choir, I've not been attending the meetings. The way that it was planned originally was part of a deal with the developers, and the idea was to provide facilities for the community. Now, if circumstances have changed, it's not for me to say, because I'm not speaking on behalf of the JCA. I'm speaking as a resident of Jericho.
When did you last use the community centre?
Oh, I was there not long at all. I occasionally go there. I didn't go on Saturday because it was pouring with rain and I had a cold, sorry. Normally, I go to collect stuff to do the litter picking. I try and go and have coffee on Saturday mornings to meet local people. I would go occasionally for classes, although I haven't recently. And I used to go when you were running your events from there, but you've moved to the church and that's a separate project. But other people use it. I am in touch with Alive and Kicking, and I'm intending to join Alive and Kicking quite soon because I'm getting older, basically.
Okay, very last question for me, Joel. People are
Yeah.
in bunker about this. People. It's like the First World War. JWG has been in a bunker for getting on for 20 years. How do you get people out of the bunkers and something developing on the Boatyard site?
What do you mean by people are in bunkers?
The JWG is living in the past. It's living in the 19th century. It's living with a dream that can. Where's 20 million quid going to come from?
Well, you have to ask the Jericho Boatyard people because I'm not. I'm a resident of Jericho, and I like seeing boats being used, people being on them, coming in to get their coal and their water, and having their boats mending and selling stuff on the boat on the canal web, footpath, and bringing a different bit of life, and not people buying over £1 million houses and filling our streets with bloody great cars that block the roads. That's why I like the boaters and the idea of more boats.
Very, very last question. Will it be built in your lifetime?
I'm intending to live way beyond normal, and I'm 80 this year, so I hope so. Although I have to say, on past history, I doubt it, but I hope so.
Well, there we go. The debate is really active on chat. I mean, a lot of boaters, a lot of Sam Worrell, apologies, Sam, I didn't realise you're a woman from Lower Hayford. Lots and lots of boaters saying, no, we want to mend our 62 feet boats in the Boatyard. There are more than 16 boats in Oxford. There may be only 16 boats on Jericho Canal side, but there are more than 16 in Oxford. It does seem to me that this Boatyard is really not a boatyard for Jericho. It's actually a boatyard for lots of people all around. And is that what we want? Is that what we want in our community? There's a comment. Travel times to nearest boatyards are Enslow 5 to 8 hours, Hayford 8 to 9 hours, Banbury 15 to 18 hours, and access can be restricted by flooding on the River Charwell. So keep the comments coming, but not just from the boaties, please. Let's have some local comments, because we're having the boat lobby is besieging us with their point of view. And the 16 boats, that's the number of residential boats in Jericho. Those are the ones to be repaired. Moss Cooper, do we actually need 3 docks? He wants to know. He earlier said he lived in Jericho for 8 years and it was a bloody mess. Well, do we? I mean, let's hear from. If you're a Jericho resident watching this, let's hear from you, not just a canal person. Right, let's move on, if we can, to Helen McGregor, who's a boater. Helen, you're here and you're live. Why a boatyard?
Hello. Yes,
Hello,
and I can assure you. Can you hear me? I can assure
Okay,
you, John.
why do we
I
need a
do
boatyard?
live in the 19th century. I have lived very happily in the 20th and 21st century for 30 years on my narrowboat in Jericho. And I just want to say that there has been a lot of factual errors presented here by you today. One being the 16 boats. Now, there may be the 16 official residential boats at the moment. However, the visitor spaces in Jericho are always full, as anyone who uses the towpath knows. The other thing is there is mooring applications, planning applications in process for more moorings along the Castle Mill stream. So, but I would also say the point is it isn't a boatyard for Jericho, for heaven's sake. It's a boatyard for the Lower Oxford Canal, and which joins with the Thames and is a vital junction of the waterways. So the other thing that is a real factual error that I'm very sad to hear is the idea that none of us use college cruisers. We have to use college cruisers, and we have used college cruisers over the years. All of us, we do all the time. And I myself have spent an absolute fortune at college cruisers on my previous narrowboat Kilsby, Kilsby was a bit of a victim of there being no boatyard, because it was very difficult to get her up to Banbury. I think your use of language is worrying sometimes, and I think to call a boatyard a factory is just very, very rhetorical, misleading, inaccurate use of language, as has been pointed out by other people.
Is it noisy?
Yes, a boat did sink. A boat did sink. A boat that was moored on the arm, a boat called Penguin's Progress, was sold, and she sank while she was being taken away. Now, that is almost certainly because there was no boatyard for the people who bought the boat or the then owner of the boat to do a proper survey. And that boat did sink and is now an ex-boat. Another boat very, very nearly sank and had to go to Cropredy this year because all the boatyards between Oxford and Cropredy were fully booked and couldn't take her. Now, the lockdown, of course, period, the boatyards were all closed. We were not allowed to go boating. You couldn't go boating. You couldn't get your boat to a boatyard. So there was, when the lockdowns finished, there was a huge backlog, and all the boatyards around have waiting lists of up to a year. I tried to get my boat in last year and the waiting list is huge. So there really is a need in Oxford to serve not just Oxford, but Banbury, other places on the Thames, all and the number of boats in Oxford, residential boats in Oxford in 2019 was 200. Now, many people moved here on their boats during the lockdown periods and have stayed. So that is growing all the time.
So this is not just a community boatyard then, it's a boatyard for people all over Oxford, people all over the south of
people
the Oxford
all over
Canal.
The waterways who want to come to the Oxford Canal and maybe join the Thames.
And John, you have, when we talk about the word community, the boating community is a community. It's a fluid community. Boats move around, and connect. So, but the important point here is that boats in Oxford, not only are there leisure boats, but the people live on the boats in Oxford, and they are in a city where it's very expensive, particularly North Oxford. Boats provide really an affordable way of living, albeit also a different way of living, but they're very important in that regard, and therefore the boatyard is in itself some essential infrastructure to supporting this sort of community of affordable living. Would you say that, Helen?
And I think it's very important to say that this is a non-debate in a way, because this debate was once in 2016.
Yeah.
Now, John, you've only been in Jericho 7 years, so you missed the public meetings, the enormous public demonstrations, both at the town hall and along the canal. You missed a time when there was virtually not a single house in Jericho that didn't have "Save Our Boatyard" posters in the window. There was an extraordinary battle and debate that took place over many, many years and was won. And it is not the boatyard issue that has delayed this development. It is the issue of social housing, so that every time a developer has bought the site, the council's stipulation for social housing has meant that the developer eventually knows that they can't make a profit, so they sell the land on. And each person thinks that they're going to get one over the council and make the council change their mind. And so far, the council isn't going to change their mind on that. But the issue of the boatyard is not what is delaying it. And it's also something that was won. There is going to be a boatyard. And if you ask me if I think in my lifetime, yes, I do think in my lifetime.
The issue was won. In 17 years, what have you achieved?
So I think what was the most important thing we've achieved is an agreed scheme that everybody got behind in 2016. I mean, let's just be realistic here. In 2016, the planners and everybody approved a wonderful scheme for Jericho that everybody could get behind. It had a boatyard suitable for boaters, a community centre that was fundable, viable, imaginative and exciting. It had a public square that was properly sized so that it could function as a public square. It was something that would have provided people with the ability to get together in Jericho. Now, the place is great, but it's small and it isn't set out for large groups of people to come together for markets and all sorts. it was a great scheme, you know. And the real question and sadness I think that we have is that why didn't that get taken forward? Now the developer will have you believe that that is because there wasn't enough profit in it, but we know for sure that there was enough profit in it. I mean, if you look at the economics of it now, the figures are available, you will see, particularly given the house prices have gone up in such a way, you will see that that scheme was very viable. So I think, you know, that's what we've achieved: a viable, doable, imaginative, fundable, exciting scheme for Jericho that meets everybody's needs. So why have we spent the last 4 years trying to get more profit and complicating matters significant? That's what we've achieved. We've achieved the solution, yet somehow we seem to not be able to deploy it. So, John, your utopian vision of a walk down through Jericho, I mean, it's lovely, but it is utopian. You know, we've already got the solution in hand. Let's do it.
And there will be
can I just speak for a second?
housing. Now, that's a utopian vision if ever there was one.
Where are you going to get 20 million quid from?
Well, you see, you're there again, John May. I love you dearly. You're a very busy man in Jericho, but you do tend to say things that aren't true. The whole scheme is 20 million, but that includes the building of the housing. But the actual elements that we need to fundraise for are it's less than the money that they had to raise to pay for the Story Museum, you know. And again, it's a similar kind of project. If you've got a great story and an imaginative scheme that people are passionate about, and it's a good project, raising money it's not easy, and it takes a couple of years, but you have to have a great project. And, you know, look at the Story Museum as an example. It's an amazing project with great ambition, worked on by fantastic people, and they got £7 million to build that. And I think it's less than that we need. And you know, it's totally doable.
And the success of Steph's own campaign to raise the money to save Kilsby, which was an absolutely incredible fundraising.
People love canals. They're super interested in them, and people, you know, from all walks of life come together around the canal. So you've got not only the boating community, but you've got local Jericho people, you've got people in wider Oxford, you've got people who care about canals. You know, it's a fantastic project, this. The other thing I would say is that when we first did our business planning, we were mentored by Coin Street from London. So they came down and they did a whole bunch of work with us about this project, and they were super excited about the Jericho project. They said it felt very much like the Coin Street project, saving Coin Street, which of course has now become Gabriel's Wharf and has become a wonderful place full of community and
stop your full flow. How much is in the JWT bank account?
Well, the JWT has got enough funds to cover the fundraising, and then the fundraising will cover the big money. So, you know, we've got the pump priming money, and we've got what we need to take us into the fundraising phase. So, you know, that's how it works in fundraising, John. You know, you don't just sit on pots of cash. You have to have a fundraising operation, and you get sensible people involved, and then they do the fundraising. What we need, and we never did get, because was an understanding from the developer that we need a certain amount of time to raise the money. You know, fundraising campaigns take a little bit of time, and that's realistic and normal. So good project, great people, good community, enough time to raise the money, vision that is exciting, means something to people, everyone can get behind it. That's what good projects are like, and that's what we've got.
So, Steph, are you just like Japanese prisoners of war? You just won't accept the war has come to an end, that actually this scheme is something of the past, and actually what you need to do is go with it, look to the future.
John, come with me. I'm going to personally pick you up in my car, if you can manage my terrible driving. And I'm going to take you to Tooley's in Banbury, because I mean, I suspect you haven't been there, and I'm not sure how many boats you actually know, but I'm going to take you to Tooley's in Banbury, and we will have a cup of tea.
You'll see it's not a factory.
And you'll see, it's definitely not a factory.
Definitely not.
It's a super fun. See, that sounded incredibly posh. It's a wonderful place to go, Tooley's, and we can talk about why it would be so wonderful to have something similar in Jericho. It is. You know, after all these years, being involved in this project, it is still something. I mean, let's just read what Philip says about it. I'm going to finish up with this. This is from your book. This is from your book. And
Good.
Philip.
In case you missed it, it's called Jericho, Oxford. Here we are. Here's the cover. Available in all good bookshops. Fire away, Steph.
Philip, as everybody knows, has always been a great supporter of the Boatyard and of the actual business of the Boatyard. You know, the living heritage, if you like, the real working Boatyard side of things. So in his book, he's in your book rather, just at the end. I'm just going to read this. He says, "But I didn't realise I used part of Jericho and the canal in my trilogy, his Dark Materials, because people who lived and worked on the water and the network of canals that spread through the whole kingdom were useful for my story. I hope that the Egyptians and their life will be given full value in my forthcoming film. But I didn't realise how much the present day life of the canal was under threat until recently, when the Boatyard business came to a head. I've always enjoyed walking along the canal and looking at the activity. Useful, human scale, craft-based, untidy, interesting in the Boatyard, with the campanile of St. Barnabas watching over it and the calm water in front. And the other day I was in the Ashmolean Museum and I saw a lovely painting by Canaletto showing the Brenta Canal near Venice. It's a scene of everyday activity, some elegantly dressed ladies and gentlemen out for a walk, one man fishing, another sitting on a pile of sacks of what might be corn or freshly ground flour, a lock, a sunlight on the water, the spire of a church. Anyway, as I looked at it, I was struck by the odd fact that only a few minutes away from the place where the picture hung, I could see exactly the same sort of thing in real life. And of course, he means in Jericho. And the painted one was catalogued and cherished and valued, and rightly so, because it's beautiful. And the real one was going to be wiped out. All that useful social activity had to be done away with because it was not making sufficient profit. So, you know, Oxford, come on.
He's a great writer. Yes, that's why he's in the book. In case you missed it, here's the book. It's £20 available in all good bookshops, and indeed from me. Now, Steph, the appeal is next Tuesday. What happens if you lose it? If the developer wins?
Well, that's just not a non-question, really, because
Well,
at the
it's
end
a
of the day, well, I'm not going to be thinking about that because
The Boatyard isn't in question in this.
no, I mean the point here is that we've made a very good case. The council has turned down the appeal because for very many very good reasons, and we have absolute faith in their judgment, the councillor's judgment, and people who will be presenting their cases will make them, and the right decision will be made. So, you know, I have every confidence that the right outcome will occur at the planning meeting. I'll be there certainly. Will you be there, John?
I will, and if you get the wrong outcome, what will happen then? If the planning inspector says, "Look, I think this scheme should go ahead," what's the Jericho Wharf Trust going to? Which bunker will you be fighting from then?
I'm just not going to be thinking about that right now, John. That's something we can, you know, it's not really the purpose of this talk here, because I'm optimistic that the right things are going to occur and that the right decisions will be made. The information speaks for itself, you know, or everything that came through at the planning appeal will be presented again, and the inspector will have the facts, you know.
Will it be built in your lifetime?
Oh, I am really excited about this project. Always have been. Love bringing people together. Love canals. I think it will be, and I think it will be. You know, this is. If you think about Oxford is a city where there are very few public urban places where you can connect with the waterways, and this Jericho Wharf, this space is one of them, and is really, you know, the only other place I can think of is, they say, the head of the river, and therefore it's extremely important, not just for the boating community but for Oxford, to make this place as it should be, and I think it will be. Yeah, I think we can do
Helen,
it.
do you think it'll be built in
Everybody
your
gets
lifetime?
together.
Yes, I
Helen,
definitely think so. I do.
No, there's been no boat repaired there for 30 years, and certainly not for the last 17. So, what
No,
makes you so hopeful?
And just to add just one last point about college cruises, you see, the thing with college cruises is that they used to have the space to crane boats out of the water, and many of us in Jericho use that, and in Oxford use that facility to crane boats out. They lost that space, so they are limited in what repair they do what they can, and we're grateful to them for that, because they do help us when they can. But their priority is, of course, the hire boat business, and they don't have the facilities for kind of essential work on hulls.
Yeah, it's the out of the what is the docks,
It's
isn't it,
the
Helen?
yeah.
It's the docks.
But there are 3 boatyards within sailing distance which have those facilities.
No, as somebody has pointed out, Enslow takes 9 miles, and that's a 1-day boat. Hayford, 14 miles, that's a 2-day boat. Banbury, 26 miles, that's a 3 to 4-day boat. Now, how would you feel if somebody told you that all the service garages between here and Newcastle are closing, so your nearest place to get your car serviced is Newcastle? How would you feel about that? That's probably about a 5 hour, so I'm being generous here, that's probably about a 5 or 6 hour drive.
I would be very happy if somebody wants to spend a
We
car
have to take
factory
time off
in my
work.
neighbourhood.
We have to do all sorts of things to ensure that extra days.
And it's even the car is too generous a description, because it's actually more like someone, your house subsiding,
Yeah.
or your
Yeah.
with house flooding
Yeah.
or something, because it's a home for many people.
When you have a leak in your hull, it's not very nice going boating with it, because more water
But
comes in.
a couple last questions. Why should we let you impose your views on the community of Jericho?
Oh, that's an interesting question, isn't it? That the community of Jericho includes us all. I think that's the point. And
The community of Jericho made their view so plain in 2016, and throughout the campaign from the eviction in 2006 and onwards, the people of Jericho were absolutely behind us and were absolutely incredible in their support. As I said, you couldn't walk through the streets of Jericho and find a house that didn't have Save Our Boatyard posters in the window, beautifully designed posters, I remember.
But there's a 50% turnover of
nobody's
people.
imposing views. Again, you're just using very, very emotive and
Inaccurate
language.
I think it's almost like drinking Kool-Aid. You have to be in favour of the boatyard, or else you don't belong. I mean, there's a new Jericho as well. Steph,
I think with all the fake news we've heard tonight, I think you've got the title of the Donald Trump of Jericho.
No, sadly not.
Fake news and just
Yeah, you see, you
Are
can't.
you going to come with me to Tooley's? Are we going to go and hang out?
I've been to Tooley's. It's all right. I've been to Tooley's, Steph.
Okay,
many
do
years.
you want to come with me?
I've seen it in the shopping centre. All right, a couple of last questions.
Because just a point on that, just to say, one of the things that's been really sad about for Tooley's is that boatyard nearly got shut down. It's 250 years old. It's a historic boatyard. When the planners didn't do the right thing by Tooley's in Banbury, they marginalised the waterways in Banbury and nearly closed the boatyard down. Of course, that was an absolute travesty. And now they're realising, we should have made more of the waterways in Banbury. It would have been good for the city centre, and they're trying to do something about it now. And Tooley's have got a new licence, and Tooley's are now run by a trust, Tooley's Trust, because they know that not only is this a business that needs to work on boats and deal with boaters' lives and repair business, but there is also the history and heritage and social aspects of running a boatyard that sit well within a charitable framework. So, if we can look at Tooley's and say, well, look, let's not make the same mistakes in Jericho, and let's acknowledge that this isn't just a commercial boatyard. There's all sorts of other social and heritage ambitions that wrap around this project, and we can learn from Banbury, and we can work together, and we can look to the future.
Steph, you'll be down a cul-de-sac there. There's no bridge. The bridge is dead. It'll be vandalism. What's the point?
The bridge isn't dead, actually. The bridge is really not dead. So that's again a little bit of a
I've read what
that's fine. Well, the bridge is not dead, but we could have a separate chat on bridge if you like. But we haven't got time now. But if anybody out there, by the way, who's listening to this,
we are
wants
running
to
out of
find
time,
out about the bridge, give me a ring.
the social centre of Jericho is no longer by the church, and in fact the church should be the centre. Not one of you tonight has mentioned the church. All you
Well,
mentioned
can I
is
mention
the
the
boatyard.
church? Because I spend a lot of time in that church, as you know. It's a very beautiful church, and the church is very much at the centre of the Jericho Canal Side scheme, always has been, and we have always worked together with the PCC to envisage a scheme that includes
That
everyone.
should be the centre of its development. Now, there's another question here from Moss
Yeah,
Cooper.
very much.
Why are you not fundraising now? You're right, it takes time, but not just a couple of years. Coin Street on the South Bank took years to achieve and was driven by the vision of one person. Why are you not fundraising?
Name. We're always the work of fundraising never stops, John.
Right, but you still didn't answer the question. How much is in the bank account?
I said we've got enough to make sure that the fundraising can occur and that the next phase of the fundraising will take off. I mean,
Okay,
let me ask you a question, if I may, because you've said you've done a lot of question asking today.
Well, that's my job.
Well, I know, but you've also got an agenda.
What's your question, sir?
You've also got an agenda of your own, so you're not exactly impartial.
Right. What's your question?
My question is why do you think that a boatyard is why do you think a museum is such a good idea as opposed to a living, breathing heritage boatyard?
A boatyard is looking backwards. Jericho needs to look forwards. There's a new Jericho. You know, the turnover of people is amazing. You know, let's look forward. Let's not look back to an age we've lost. But you know, if you want,
let's look forward to an age where more and more people are going to be choosing the sustainable and much cheaper sustainable housing that is an alternative housing that is living on boats. More and more people are buying boats. More and more people are going on holiday on boats. The lockdown caused an absolute explosion in the holiday boating, staying in Britain and boating on the canals. So boating is something that is really, really, really going to grow, and so that's the future too.
let me ask you.
One thing that really came up when this went at the eviction. And one thing that I think is important to use the term again now is that there was an element that it was seen as the people that were very against the boatyard development. It was seen as a little bit of social cleansing, that these people are undesirables, those crusty boaties. We want rid of them and for Jericho to become a smart, gentrified place. And we are the future as well. Boaters are the future, every bit as much as luxury housing. And in fact, as the economic climate gets worse and worse every day, who is going to be able to afford to buy the luxury housing along the canal? People are more likely going to be wanting to buy a boat.
Well, we've had an interesting hour with lots and lots of comments. In case you missed the previous three commercials, there is a book all about Jericho, which is called Jericho Oxford, which is edited by myself, by Mark Davis, who's an ex-boater, by the architect Paul Southhouse, and by Chris Andrews. It's a cracking coffee table book. It's available for 20 quid from bookshops, from some shops in Jericho. It's selling like hotcakes. So please buy that, or buy the tea towel as well. Meanwhile, if you feel, here's a tea towel. It's a wonderful hand drawing of Jericho done by Paul Southhouse. That's only a £5, and I think that's total value for money. We had some German people who bought, I think, 6 of them because they were sending them to their friends in Germany with a red mark where they lived. But that's Jericho. So I'm not sure we move forward. If you enjoy my Jericho, and believe me, we've had 300 events in the last 6 years. We've raised an awful lot of money for the church and indeed for the community association. Why not give a bit of money to it? Here's a place to give. Lloyds Bank, 309626. That's Lloyds Bank, 309626. The account number is 48518460. Account 48518460, and it's Jericho Good Works. Please give some money. It costs me an awful lot of money to do this. Next week there are 2 events, and they're both sold out. There's a tour of Trinity College, and also Cara Hunter, who's a best-selling novelist, is doing a walk, but they're both sold out. But in 2 weeks' time, you can see what's behind the new St Paul's House in Cranham Street. What's actually behind those plastic sheets? Hear from the architect and hear from the clerk of the works. Let's find out what's happening there. I mean, do you know, for example, there's going to be a Sainsbury's on the ground floor of that? Now's the time to find out. If you want to find out what's on My Jericho, simply go to myjericho.co.uk. You'll find lots and lots and lots of intelligent debate going on there. Lots of events. There's a celebration of Morse in March, for example, all day long. The end of Mars. So the question, profits from the book, they go straight back to Jericho Good Work. So this is paid for by you buying books. So worry not. So please. Good luck to everybody in the Plan and Appeal next Tuesday. Good luck to Jericho. If you want my view, it will never be built in my lifetime, and indeed in many lifetimes after me. Thank you very much. See you all live in 2 weeks' time, and keep the comments coming. Bye now.
Yeah.